Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us again on Social Contract. I'm Nicolette, and I'm here with my intrepid co-host, Jared.
Good morning, everybody.
And we've got some really interesting topics for you today. We are looking at some current events, and we're going to be talking about some possible solutions, rather, to some societal problems that we all kind of have seem to have a mutual interest in. So we're going to be talking about serial killers, in other words. Everybody seems to love to talk about serial killers, and women often there's kind of a running joke in the media and I guess internet and memes and things that women are really interested in serial killers and murder documentaries and that kind of a thing. And it's really not so much about being like super interested in it as it is that we just are trying not to get murdered. Sorry about that little tech difficulty. So yeah, it's how to study the fact that if we look if we watch enough murder documentaries and look for the signs enough that we'll be like, no, you're not gonna get me today. So we'll be talking about some possible solutions to mitigating that kind of behavior in society and looking at some facts and some stats and stuff like that. But to start us off, Jared has been doing some interesting research about some things going on in his neck of the woods. So I will turn it over to him and we'll see what's going on in Arizona.
We have, hey, guess what? It's not Israel Palestine for the first
Yeah,
time
there we
yet.
go. Yeah, we're going to
For the
switch it up again today. Hey, that stuff's still going on. FYI, still bad. But
yeah,
we've got a little bit of domestic news for you today.
for the first week ever, I want to talk about this. There's many examples I could have chosen here, but like my whole point of the point of this headline: Governor Hobbs, who's the Arizona governor, urges Biden to send guard to Lukeville and repay Arizona $500 million. Here's why. What's the point of looking at a story like this? Like, the story itself has importance, and we're going to talk about it, but I want to illustrate how we're now we're approaching election season, even though it is almost a full 12 months away before anybody's going to be voting federally. There are some primaries coming up kind of soon, which I should just put an asterisk next to, because a whole lot of these states seem to have weirdly canceled their primary or made the rules as such that only one person can possibly win their primary. Most of the Democrats, I'm trying to. There's always instances of both the Republicans and Democrats being weird with their primaries and essentially setting a like you must have this much money to participate line, which keeps out most of the rabble, but you'll still get like your Vivek Ramaswamy's showing like your Trump's people who are just like, I'm a rich guy, I'm gonna come and like I have the ability to do this regardless of if the establishment wants to try and stop me. But we are told that there's a huge difference to talk about, like to use the was it the Kyle Kalinske line where it's like Democrats are 100 billion trillion gazillion times better than Republicans, and our point as post-duopoly leftists is that no, there is very little policy difference in this really singular party that has two different brands. It's as if Coke and Pepsi were literally owned by the same company. I could make that same reference with like, it's like I like Frosted Flakes, I like Fruit Loops. It's like, well, they're both General Mills. Like, the money goes to the same guy regardless of which of these two aesthetic brands you support.
They share the
So
same interests.
yeah, they want to get the same things done, and as evidence, we can present that the same thing seems to happen regardless of who is in office. There's just more or less like screaming about it as it happens. Governor Hobbs, can you guess which of the party affiliations she goes with? She is a Democrat. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, which has a Democrat mayor. We have usually like a Democrat like city council. Our state legislature goes back and forth. Our state voted for Biden. Weirdly, that was like kind of a we're a swing state now, which is interesting. Yet, when it comes to things like the border, the Biden administration is continuing to build sections of the border wall in Arizona. I hear about it on my local news occasionally. And in this case, Governor Hobbs urges Biden to send guard to Luke. This is like, we gotta secure the border, like the exact same rhetoric that you got, which is why we can't vote for Trump, right? Like, if you vote for Trump, you're gonna have he's gonna be super horrible to immigrants, and the Democrats will somehow be less evil, even though statistically The Democrats deport more people. They like all the arguments we've already heard. We've all been hanging out with like basically all the stuff the Bernie Sanders campaign was throwing around back when Bernie Sanders had any kind of like credibility or pretended to have principles. That's
what was it? Wasn't it Obama that had the most deportations to his record of like any president ever?
He did the most deportations of any U.S. president ever, and then the argument you will hear from weird shit libs is, yeah, he deported them, but he didn't make them leave. Like, he served them papers and then just let them back out into America, and they didn't have to leave. And I'm like, what argument? All right. Well, he just put a warrant out for their arrest and criminalized their existence in the country.
Yeah, only that. Only stopped them from being able to get any work or any social services or, just the little stuff, just the minor things.
Just made it impossible to exist.
Yes, exactly.
Legally, and forces you into jobs that are even more abusive than the ones that are going to hire you without having a driver's license, like ID in the first place. Time. So it's from Phoenix. Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs has heard the questions all week. Why isn't she sending the Arizona National Guard to the border? A lot of the politicians are calling for this action, aren't understanding what the scope of their duties might be able to be. That was a quote. It sounds like I'm just bad at reading. I think it was a weird sentence. Hobbs told reporters on Friday. Shortly after making that statement, Hobbs released let's say that statement again. A lot of the politicians calling for this action aren't understanding what the scope of their duties might be able to be. Is my reading comprehension bad? What does that sentence mean? A lot of the politicians calling for this, so people who want the more National Guard at the border aren't understanding what the scope of their duties, what the National Guard, I think they're saying that sending the National Guard won't be as effective because the National Guard can only do specific duties, is what I gather.
It sounds like passing the buck to me, like people using doublespeak to try to say, we can only do this, and they can only do this, and there's no solution to your problem, bye.
Might be able to be. It's a fun series of words. Shortly after making that statement, Hobbs released a letter to President Joe Biden, RE urgent request regarding our southern border. Hobbs urges Biden to order the Guard to help reopen the Lukeville port of entry, 180 miles southeast of Phoenix and 150 miles southwest of Tucson. The border crossing has been shut down since Monday. So, to summarize that situation, the reasoning is there are too many people coming across the border, so they have shut down Lukeville to process people. So it's not just like that it's shut down and abandoned, it's that it's closed for people to actually cross it right now, just like regular, if you're just going to Mexico for a vacation or whatever. If you want to go to Rocky Point, it's like a resort thing that's it's in that area if you're a wealthy, not even wealthy.
Are they still allowing commerce through there?
I think it's nothing. Apparently traffic is being diverted like 3 hours in either direction to the next point of entry. And that's because Lukeville is being used to process, to like catch up with the backlog of people trying to cross initially, like full-on undocumented, different from like the tourists crowds going through.
Oh, yeah, okay, of course.
And Hobbs wants money to get that back open so people can go to like Rocky Point and continue their normal vacation activities. Mm-hmm. Saturday, Governor Hobbs will travel to Lukeville Port of Entry and survey surrounding area with Customs and Border Patrol, Tejano Atham Nation Chairman Verlon Jose, and AZ National Guard Chief Major General Kerry Muhlenbeck, per Hobbs spokesperson. Hobbs will get close up personally. I just read that tweet. A historic surge of tens of thousands of migrants in the remote desert area, site of Oregon Pipe Cactus National Monument and the Tejano Atham Nation, has overwhelmed U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So, like, we're just in the exact if you just swapped out the names, this sounds like, oh, Governor Greg Abbott demands National Guard funding to deal with border crisis, or like it's just the exact same series of events takes place, seemingly regardless of Democrat or Republican running my state, at least. We had Obama talking about path to citizenship and like fixing this stuff years and years ago. And the more I've learned, read, and researched this topic, the more I see that we only ever talk about the border crisis like at the very, very end. Like we talk about the results of a lot of actions without talking about the actions that led up to them. Like, why are there so many people who are trying to come into America from where? Like, and what are they hoping to do when they get here? And then there's a million layers. I'm going to be a little bit scattershot on this, trying to make this all make sense. What do I believe the primary reason that capital, like our owning class, the capitalist class, the people who have power in the system of capitalism, why do they kind of want people coming in over the border? The wage suppression created with don't get stuck on the, oh, Pepper is saying that, oh, illegal immigrants are coming to take our jobs. Not quite. It's that unscrupulous companies, such as Tyson Chicken is a real good example, a company that made, their owners were making bets on how many of their employees would die from COVID. They primarily employ like migrant workers. They're documented. They have, like, you still have to have a green card work for Tyson, but you know that Tyson can pay people who are over here they have complete economic control over, because since they're only there because they're legally allowed to stay because they work for XY company. That company, if they fire them, they essentially deport them also. They have such complete control over these people's lives that, do you think the green card owning employees of Tyson Chicken, who are paid as little as legally possible, are ever going to be able to, let's say they start a union. How does that union effort end? Wow, we sent 400 employees back to Mexico, or really Guadalajara. That seems to be where the actual like migrant labor force is coming from.
It's kind of just the whole Central American area.
Why are people having to flee Guatemala, El Salvador, and other Central American countries?
It couldn't be because of the United States destabilizing the area for profit.
Like, it's just this long chain of shit that leads to what is a problem. It is a problem to have tens of thousands of people just standing in a desert hoping to come into America, and it is not a solution to just say, hey, the whole world, come live here. That's the solution to like the imperialist terrorism that the U.S. rots on the world, which drives immigration in the first place. Why do I have to leave my house? Well, it got blown up by a bomb that said made in USA, and now I have to go live. Like, people don't just want to leave their houses. People don't want to walk 1,000 miles on foot or get in a fucked up bus with like a million other people and get robbed and stabbed. Like, they don't want to do that.
Children, trying to do it with small children a lot of the time too.
No one's carting their kids across the continental shelf just to go to Disney World.
Like, right, that's an excellent point too, because I think a lot of people are like wondering, well, what is the crisis? Why do they want to get here so bad? Things are bad here. And it's because things are worse there. And that's exactly the point. They're not coming here because they're trying to go to Disney World or capitalize and game the system. They are in such a bad situation that they're looking at another bad situation as the only other solution. And it's completely of our making. And we're disseminating all this money to all these different places in the world that don't need it, just to perpetuate war. And so a few benefit at the top, when these are the people that obviously, if we help at all stabilize their countries that we ruined, this would not be a problem. There would be no there.
It seems that a lot of liberals, and I used to be this exact same person, like we stop at, hey, when immigrants get here, we need to be very nice to them and take care of them, which I don't like disagree with. If your whole life has been shattered and you're here, like the U.S. ruling class does bear some responsibility because they're the ones who made that situation happen. Mm-hmm. The very, very low wage workers whose wages are active, because if you're like a software developer, yeah, your wages probably aren't being suppressed by somebody hiking 190,000 miles up into Texas. If you are a farm worker, if you're a cab driver, if you're like a retail food worker, something like that, your wages probably are being partially suppressed by that. And the left, people who are actual progressives, people who want to progress to something that is better than what we have right now, your answer to people bringing that up can't be, you're a horrible racist, how dare you say that? Like, you can't just act like the problem doesn't exist. You have to dig a little deeper. People are being, quote, allowed into the country because the people who own the biggest corporations, it's a useful tool to both keep wages down and to just kind of, it's like the George Carlin bit, to scare the shit out of people and keep them going to those jobs. Like, you need some kind of, it's called like the reserve army of labor, where if you all go, we're going to go on strike, F you, boss, they need to have the credible threat of, we will simply replace you with people who are willing to work for less because they've spent most of their lives getting beaten.
Right, exactly. That's exactly the point. This is being perpetuated by the worst among us. Yes. And it looks like when someone has an opinion about like, hey, this is not good, it can very easily be discoursed into, well, you're being racist. Of course we have room for them. Of course we've got to bring them in, which I agree, we do. And this is a complete situation of our making. But in so making it, we have, destabilized these countries to the point of now we essentially have slave labor that we can bring in and serve these corporations. And I think a lot of us have heard about the rolling back of and even governors and such signing declarations to roll back child working protections. And that's not because they think that your 11-year-old at the middle school is going to go work a shift at the on the kill floor at the slaughterhouse. It's because they also want control over the child immigrants, because that's like an untapped resource to them. So, you shouldn't be fooled by what you're hearing and think, oh, this is appalling. It's way worse than it seems, because it's obviously the affluent people, the citizens, the people who, went through the whole system and have themselves a career and then have their children. They're not the ones at stake here. It's completely done in darkness. It's completely the people who are the most vulnerable among us that are being brought in for all manners of slave labor. And we're not just talking about, physical labor like migrant working. We're talking about sex slavery. We're talking about domestic slavery, where wealthy people literally have employ someone, like you say, from Guatemala or Central America as a domestic worker, but then don't pay them, so, and don't, or maybe if they do have a citizenship status, they can just abscond those papers and hold them, like, literally. This is not a new thing. There's a lot of wealthy people that you might be surprised to find out that use these vulnerable people as their personal slaves. So when we say slavery is gone, technically it is in the way that we would imagine it, but it's really just figuring out how to pass the buck on to the next generation of people taking advantage of other people.
It's not that the kinds of workers who are the most negatively affected by the really the scam that is bringing in foreign labor and then treating them however you want to further class goals, to continue the domination of the owning class. Like, you need a reason, you need a way to convince poor people that their real enemy is not the people above them who actually have agency and make decisions, but it is the other poor people. And then you have to figure out, okay, how do we get them to fight? Well, we got to categorize them. Oh, what's a really useful way for this? Okay, they're a citizen, you're not a citizen. They're a different color than you, so that's where you got, they have to come up with a justification for why some people live in absolute squalor and other people seem to do all right. And a really good excuse is, oh, well, they're simply these idiots from blank, horrible, dirty country, and that's why, people don't just come up with this on their own. In general, our interests, the interests of very poor Americans and the interests of very poor Central Americans are extraordinarily aligned when compared to your average American and Jeff Bezos. So how do you keep that natural solidarity from occurring? Keep us from teaming up with each other? You have to push it racism and Islamophobia, and you have to get into fights they're different than you, so frickin' make sure you're always at each other's throats. That guy took your job.
Divide everyone as much as possible. When we would realize that, if you just took a few minutes, and I think this is a little more common among the left set, I guess you would say, which also itself has kind of been co-opted, because there's a lot of strange opinions on the left that kind of double back to the right.
Palestine broke everybody's brains.
Right? Yeah, but it's just that's the whole thing. I mean, it was no mistake that starting back in the 80s, that they started taking civics classes out of school, because they don't want you to be civic. They don't want you to work civically. They and that's why all the car commercials promote rugged individualism. You don't need public transportation. You need a truck. That's what Americans do. That's what Americans have. And if you don't have one, you know what you are. It's a subtle message all the time of the whole pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You take care of your own. forget about anybody in your community, because if we start thinking more community minded, which obviously is a goal of this show in particular, that becomes a danger to the superstructure of how things are. If we call attention to using migrant workers as slaves, as a slave workforce, and how horrible their lives are, then that sheds light on the problem that they don't want anybody to know about. They want you working your own job unhappily and focusing on your own debt that you shouldn't have, and so on and so forth, because it makes us they want you to think it makes you stronger, it makes you more capable if you're in this individualistic mindset, but it because they want to take away from the idea that there is strength in numbers and in knowledge.
I want to, with a few minutes left on this thing, I want to describe what I guess would be. We'll say, well, what do you think? What do you think the policy should be? What is the actual solution? I talk about how we're talking about the end symptom of a whole lot of other issues. Like, let us identify those issues. What would I like to see happen? What is my impression of what the like socialist or like Marxist viewpoint would be? I want a world where people do not have to leave their countries because of like for economic, it's almost always for economic reasons. It's like, oh, well, they're being chased by the mob. It's like, well, why does the mob have the power to chase people around? Probably for economic. For every bit of border security that we add here in the US, we also need to remove a foreign military base, get rid of this like weird IMF loan condition things where the US gets to just like Shanghai your entire economy and tell you what you can do with your own resources as a foreign, supposedly sovereign nation. Increased sovereignty around the world, nations being able to make decisions for themselves and work for the betterment of their own people rather than whatever Banana Republic company happens to own. Like, that's the history of the U.S. and Latin America, right? And in South America, we see the U.S. owning class, the U.S. capitalist class sees a resource they want, and rather than trying to have open, fair competition, which would be the capitalist thing you're supposed to do, right? Or a collaborative win-win type of arrangement where, hey, we get your sugar cane and then we help you build a freaking power plant or something, like something where everyone benefits. We do extremely exploitative like loans, or worst case, or best case if you're the owners of the sugar plantation, you just overthrow their government, put a guy you like in charge, and then boom, you got a Pinochet, you have Nicaragua for most of its history. You have just most of South America. And then the countries who buck that trend, your Bolivias, Cubas, Nicaraguas, then they're accused of like, oh, they have a dictator in charge of that. Like, you see the reaction when a country just grabs hold of its own resources. They're threatening war with Mexico, or at least they were. I don't know if Lindsey Graham's still saying that, because Mexico nationalized their lithium industry recently. Whenever a country tries to take control of its own resources and tell a U.S., usually like the Western world-backed, NATO country-backed company, you have to have a deal that's either very good, that's better terms for us, or no, we are keeping all our own stuff, and you may trade with us like a normal freaking country and not like a psychopath that moves in and robs us at gunpoint. You see the extreme reaction. They're declared official enemy states. That is the kind of thing that will lead to far fewer immigration crises, are that if countries are allowed to use their own wealth without interference from powers like the United States, or China, anybody. If China was doing the same thing, I would have the exact same criticism for China. They just don't seem to be. They kind of do a lot of win-win arrangements. Hey, Africa, we need this mining resource. Cool. We're going to also build you a train system, and like that's how their deals tend to work out. And sure, in a few years it could turn out, oh, surprise, Scooby-Doo mask off. China was evil the whole time, and now they've taken over the world. But like, I got to see evidence for that, and so far the evidence is going in the opposite direction.
Yeah, which America does not like for us to know about. And it's interesting because, and you can check this out on the RB in Long Beach YouTube channel. Our episode last week was commemorating the death of Henry Kissinger, and this is straight out of the Kissinger playbook. The way that we handle things and the way that we handle other countries, I think probably was most well adapted and learned from what he had done in his time as Secretary of State under Nixon. So this is kind of just perpetuating what really works when your end game is not open source capital, but world domination. And That's really what we're looking at this. Is we just are. I mean, it comes as no surprise to anyone. We're not saying anything, revolutionary here. America has always tried to dominate everything, and we're finally being challenged by, China and Russia, which is why we're picking fights with. When I say we, I mean the United States. The United States is picking fights with China and Russia all of a sudden, and you're wondering, like, where is this coming from? Why are we involved in Ukraine? Why are we involved with Taiwan? Like, who cares? That's their business. But it's because we're looking for ends to, the kind of the stop poking me thing. We just keep poking and poking and poking and trying to look for a vulnerable spot to where they're finally like, all right, we're gonna fight. So
when you look at an official enemy country, the United States, like 99 times out of 100, you're looking at a nation that is enforcing its own sovereignty and not allowing the U.S. to just do whatever it wants. Why do we hate Russia so much? They don't take our shit. Like, we don't have like IMF monetary controls over them. We don't get to tell them what to do with their natural, like Gazprom is a nationalized industry. I have many criticisms for Russia, but the fact that they use their natural gas resources to enrich the country, well, Pepper, they just do that to make their citizens happy, so they keep voting for them. Well, fuck, that'd be awesome in America if somebody would do something to make us happy and help us.
if we could adopt the then this is something we'll address, down the road about nationalizing certain things, but it's just like, in robot tax on the companies that are automating and using AI and getting rid of their human workforces, that would more than pay for a UBI system. And it could work just like the dividend does in Alaska. I've seen people say, I'd like to see so-and-so live off of a UBI. And it's like, well, you don't live off the UBI necessarily. It's supplemental. It's something you earn by way of being there, by being a citizen of the United States and, contributing to that system. So we'll get into more in depth on another episode, but that's exactly how it could work. If we weren't we always say late stage capitalism, but what it really is just another term for predatory capitalism, that we're kind of in a death spiral.
Super imperialism is
imperialism. That's even more accurate. We're really in a death spiral about taking everything that we can. You could see it every day. Look at television, or look at streaming, or look at the radio, look at any form of media, how you can't even use the internet without an ad blocker. Like, it is just ads on ads on ads on ads on ads. And it's just like, the ads are on the ads, who are on the ads will stop your video to play an ad. And it's just like, this is overwhelming. This is terrible, because...
And then if that advertiser doesn't like the shit you're saying, they'll have your post taken down and get...
Exactly. It's because things have run so long as, in this predatory system, that this is where this goes. And we think, like, it couldn't get much worse. Well, it will. We'll find out. Like, we're going to find out how much worse it can get, especially as the AI and automation really starts eating up the human workforce. So that's a coming. We got that on the way.
This is the last thing I got to say on it. I'm trying to, my perception of what, like, socialism even is has been progressing and changing constantly since I started reading about the thing. And the things that I'm describing, nations securing their own side. This includes the U.S., by the way. We do not have sovereignty. Our owning class, our capitalist class, does not give a shit about the United States. It seems that if the U.S. really starts going down, they've already mostly abandoned. Like, there's no nationalism in what they do. They don't care about America. They keep their money in other countries. They're trying to make money in other countries. And where do they live and vacation? Like, they're gonna use us up and then, like, throw away the husk, like they have with countless nations before us. And the plan currently seems to be to run away to China, to, like, F over China, take them over. We have a brand new country to drive into the frickin' ground, just like they did with the U.S. So, like, what is socialism? It's the process of every nation kind of, like, it'll be kind of one at a time at first, starts popping up, secure your sovereignty, use your resources for the betterment of your population, and then, like, from there, anything is possible.
Yeah. And we really can edge towards that utopian Jetsons future that we have all been promised all the time forever. It is possible. It's just not possible right now by the way that we are all forced to live. And it seems impossible because it's like, well, how can you get everybody to know? Well, maybe everybody doesn't know the word socialism. Maybe everybody doesn't know the word capitalism or communism, or they think that they're bad words or whatever, or they just don't understand because they're trying to live their life. But they are unhappy about how they're living their life. They don't like that they're stuck in a job. They don't like that they're in debt. They don't like that that they don't have good health insurance, and they want universal health care. We are united by these things. It's just a matter of now organizing the thoughts and trying to reach out to people. And that's what, kind of our goal is. And what we want to do in general is just get some, just get some better functionality out of the country. That, he's right. We're in it's basically coming down to it's a husk that's going to get thrown away. And, and at this stage, it comes down to the people figuring out where we go from here, because we don't have adequate representation. Our government works for itself and works for its corporate donors and its lobbyists. That itself is a corporation unto itself. And they're taking all of the resources and they're leaving us with nothing. So people know this. They just don't necessarily know the keywords. They don't know where to look for non-corporate information. So that's why... Oh, did you have something you were going to say? Did I cut you off?
I have a great hope for not just the American working class, but the working class in general, because instinctively people do get it. Like, weirdly, the people who I think are the farthest from it are those who are politically active, quote unquote, like shit libs, like you're like hardcore Joe Biden, actual like I love that man voters. I think they are farther from it than. Because if you just you talk about civics classes, if you take the America that is described to you in civics classes, where you have a government that is responsive to its citizenry, a government of, for, and by the people and all that shit, and just like actually did it, because what they mean is for the all of those things, but only for the tiny ruling class. They get all that stuff. But if that actually applied to all of America, there you go, man. You're doing a socialism. You're doing it. You're on your way. So it's not even that we have to get all these new radical crazy ideas. They already agree with all this shit. You just have to get around the distractions of, we can't though because lazy X group of bad people, like of fellow workers who suck. Like
it does take more conversation on, personally. You do own a responsibility to talk to your friends and your relatives about things. Maybe they're, if they are, again, like you said, if they're Joe Biden stands, or if they're Democratic, sycophants or conservatives, you might have a harder time. But there is common ground there. Nobody's happy. Everything should be great. Our technology is so far behind other countries. Our living conditions are for supposedly being like the number one country in the world are just shit. So at this point, there's just a lot of people dealing with a lot of things that they don't like. So it's really just, if we just continue the conversation and kind of envelop people more and more and more, make it accessible, because a lot of people just want to argue on the internet and call people stupid. You don't win people over by telling them they're stupid and then telling them why they're stupid. So that's something
we are for greater freedom, both economic and like political. We are for greater freedom of speech. We are for greater list of options of how, like, it's all very, very American sounding. Like, I don't see any. So socialism is incompatible with America. Like, you have no imagination, I guess, or just think that the U.S. is just full of just we're just born evil. We're the evilest people, which I don't believe. Like, I don't buy that.
Yeah, I'm with you. So, you want to talk about some serial killers going on?
Yeah, I thought in your intro you were going to get into the whole, like, when you're talking about, like, women and serial killer, watching the shows, where I thought you were going to talk about the phenomena of how many people seem to want serial killers as, like, pen pals in jail and, like...
Yeah, no, that was, I was kind of, I didn't really cover that. That is the thing, definitely, whether, like, I'm in love with you, serial killing is rad. I was kind of not talking about that.
There's like, he's misunderstood.
I was thinking more about the people who don't want to get murdered.
I think I heard that in like a Wanda Sykes bit when I was really young, talking about like, yeah, ladies watch these shows because we're trying to like plan and strategize.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Like, just to make sure like we know the signs, and that we're like, no, we're not doing, you're not going to get me today. And that's the way I internalize it anyways. Of course, everybody likes a good mystery or to hear a solving of a mystery or that kind of a thing. But I think it, in an entertainment type of a way, but I think it's also come down to how much can we learn, because it's, serial killers, they're not all one size fits all. There's not a cookie cutter thing. They all have their own motives. They all have their own modus operandi. So it comes down to trying to figure out every single possible version of not getting murdered. And I hate to quote him because he's such a chode, but Louis C.K. had a bit a few years ago, who again turned out to be a predator of women, but not a murderer, just a predator of women. And but he had a bit where he would say that, you know, it was like a man and a woman were meeting up for a date. The woman gets in the man's car and says, "Where are we going tonight?" And the man says, "To your death, statistically." So that's right. Like, and that's true. Like, women, like, whether or not it's a serial killer, and that's vague anyways. The definition and concept of serial killing is a lot of media driven information as well, because there's different types. But and they all get branded serial killer because that's like a really big buzzword. But the idea is that, you know, women are in constant danger, and the homeless are in constant danger, and sex workers are in constant danger, and young people are in constant danger. And I personally knew someone for many, 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 many years who very, very narrowly escaped being the victim of a well-noted serial killer in the 70s in California during the golden age, you know, of serial killers. So we're all not that far removed, you know, from this sort of thing. And then just here recently, we've been hearing about the Gilgo Beach killer was finally apprehended. But there's another one that the media is deeming an apprehended serial killer. And that is somebody completely new to us. Technology.
Yeah, I had not heard. The last true crime murdery thing I watched was that Netflix series where it was the... Oh, geez, this is going to be like the Vegas thing. That Netflix series where the guy is falsely or not false. It's the one where like his son ends up going to jail and everyone agrees that the son should be like, he had nothing to do with it, but the dad, we don't know. And you know what I'm talking about? Is that Making a Murderer? Is that what it was called? Also, did we lose Nicolette or did we lose me? Nicolette, if you can hear me, I got a freeze frame for you.
So,
or
when we look
freeze frame for me.
Look at this.
Nicolette's gone. That's what happened. All right. So I'm not going to like ape while Nicolette gets back on her internet. I'm not going to ape the entire conversation, but I'll end up restating a lot of this stuff. Like, why are homeless people in so much danger? Like, how it's a dude in I think LA who just kind of like went around casually shooting homeless people for like 4 days in a row. Killed 3 homeless
sorry
people.
about that. I think that everything kind of bound up on me. Let me see. I don't think my tabs are gone now, but I'll basically just tell you that what happened was just recently. That a killer of homeless people was just apprehended. He killed 4 people. 1 was robbery related, and 3 were. And this is in Los Angeles again, because that's like where all the serial killers are. But they, this man, I believe his last name was Powell. I lost my tab, but he went on I think this is more of a spree killing, but there's some leeway there. Again, the buzzword is serial killer. That gets people's attention. Here we go. Thank you, Jared. So this man, he just over the course of a weekend just killed 3 unhoused people for just shits and giggles, I guess. But they managed to catch him fairly quickly. So the idea is that, again, that these people come in different shades, and the most vulnerable among us are sex workers, are homeless people, so but there are, and it's very hard to track these people because it's like what is making them do this, what about society is causing them to do this. So here's a couple of quick facts that come from a study by the Florida Gulf Coast University, who takes the data about serial killings and their victims and processes it. So here's a couple of quick facts I'd like to share with you. In the United States, the peak number of serial killers was in 1987, and it has declined. The numbers went between 800, and this is just known and it's general because a lot of people get away with their crimes due to colonialism supporting this, and a lot of the benefit of the doubt being given to white men who commit these crimes, and they get out over and over and over again and allow them to keep committing the crimes. And the uniting factor in all of this, the cops are super stupid and they won't share with each other, and they get territorial about things, and they won't discuss with each other about what each one knows. So these people get away with it over and over again. So the peak was serial killing was in 1987, and it's declined every decade since. And now there's only about, as of 2020, about 3 convicted, let's say, killers. So in the U.S. leads globally in the numbers of killers, accounting for 67% of all killings. Female serial killers in the U.S. are lower than the global average, which is 8.6. Historically, it was mostly white males, but the percentage is the scale of this is rebalancing, and it's saying now that statistically that it's more black men that are rising in number, and that number has been increasing since 1990. But that's also because the FBI and government started considering, looking at the most vulnerable populations, being that Black communities are often underfunded, underserved, and often end up being preyed upon by, gang situations and organized crime. So they started counting those, and that's why the numbers had changed since about the 1990s. And then 73.2% of serial killers across the board that have been interviewed report having been abused as children and raised by their natural parents in some capacity. And the majority of serial killers which at 59.4% lacked a high school degree or any formal education. So there is a clear link between there's all kinds of, there's widow killings, and there's, Black widow type of things, and there's, different types of serial killing. But if we're just talking, and there's spree killing, but if we're just talking about what we think when the idea comes to mind of a serial killer, just somebody that goes out and kills somebody, just whether it be sex workers or homeless people or just any people, spouses, that there is a clear link between people being underprivileged and becoming like a serial killer later in life. Of course, there's like the super smart ones, like the Ted Bundys and stuff like that, and what have you. But the idea is that there is a few common links, and if often they're connected to robbery, like this most recent apprehension was. Sometimes it's just for the pleasure, like the Go-Go Beach killer, who was second most recently. But the idea is that if we as a society moved towards more socialized solutions, that some of these things could be mitigated. And we also say, well, okay, well, in the whole golden age of serial killing, which mostly took place in Los Angeles, California, in the greater California area, what's changed? Why were there so many then, but there's so few now? And that's because, we now have genetic genealogy and DNA and things like that are commonplace. But there's also been, one of the leaders of this study, Dr. Terrence Leary, who is a psychology professor at the Florida Gulf Coast University, points out that even though that the serial killers, the individual serial killer type of killings are going down, mass killings are going up. So the people that still have those same kind of mentalities are seeing that they can create much more havoc, much more damage, get much more attention to themselves by doing the mass killings. So these things are sort of one and the same. So I think it's pretty obvious if we had social programs to eliminate homelessness, then they wouldn't be a vulnerable population that could be preyed on. Like, I think it was Powell was his last name, that just happened. Same with legalizing sex work. If this was something that could be done, and they weren't required, to live on the fringes of society and be so vulnerable. And then that's sex workers, male and female alike. Typically female sex workers are more victimized. I think just because they exist more in greater numbers. But also we find that society and law enforcement look at these people, as well as homeless people, as throwaway people. Nobody's really that worried about whether or not the case is solved or whether or not these people see any kind of justice.
If you read the article, the only named person murdered was the guy who got robbed that he followed home. It's just like homeless guy 35, homeless guy 68, homeless guy 54. Because they probably just don't
Exactly.
even know who they are. It's not even that like, oh, they're evil. They're probably just like, well, they didn't have an ID. Guess we don't know who it is.
Or they don't care enough, or they don't think that their audience would care enough. Like, big deal. Like, but that's exactly the point. We're perpetuating the idea that these people are nameless fodder for whoever wants to do whatever to them. And it doesn't really matter to anybody. So there have been countless numbers of killers who have preyed specifically on sex workers just for the fact that they are so easy to come by and so easy to disappear that they are not considered part of society. And this is especially true with law enforcement. Nobody cares. They're not worried about these people. They don't feel like it's, that they're any great benefit to society. There's been a lot of these killers who also, double or have been, cops especially, or people involved in law enforcement who think that they're cleaning up the streets, who think that they're doing society a favor by getting rid of these elements, these nasty elements of people.
Like your Rorschach from Watchmen.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and in some cases, these killers, they do think of themselves in this way. They think that they are doing some sort of civic duty. It is about a lot about gratification. There is a lot of that going on, but in their warped perception of things, it's ones that prey on people like that do seem to see themselves as some kind of social hero that they will be worshipped. And that's why you get a lot of these people, when they finally get caught, they can't wait to tell you about what they did or how they did it or who they did it to, because they feel like they did not commit a crime and they did nothing wrong and they should be thanked. So they're excited to relay their story. So it's also no surprise that the greatest industries where we see the serial killing trends coming out of are truck drivers, long haul drivers, ex-military or military adjacent or active military, and cops. And this is because they have such easy access to different people. You think about truck drivers; they're traveling all over the place, making all these stops. A lot of the time that there are sex workers, in these places, they can pick them up, kill them, do with them what they wish, get rid of them. And this has not really changed over time. And then again, the military and cops, they look like authority figures, what can be trusted, and they can lure them in as well and take advantage of those statuses and get people to come to them, and then they can do the same thing. So I think also a solution to that would be, greater oversight in these industries to, instead of pretending it's not happening, directly confront it and say, we are watching you. We know what people get on this job for. We know that they think that this is a perk, or, for whatever reason, they want to enact their death fantasies out on other people. So if we had an end to homelessness or something significant done with homelessness, they wouldn't be available to be preyed on. If sex work was legal, they could do it out in the open instead of in the back corners of society. And if there was greater oversight in these industries where statistically there is a lot of killings going on, we could make a huge difference just in those ways as a society, protecting these really vulnerable people. And more so, really start, don't look at these, even the mass shootings and these serial killers who have taken out their problems on society, when they're 15 plus, and start looking at them when they're 6 or 7 years old as they're showing maladaptive behaviors in school. Like, get them into therapy immediately. The CDC estimates that in 2021, 14.9% of children aged 5 to 17 have received some sort of mental health treatment, whether it just be therapy, talk therapy, or going on to medications. So I don't know necessarily if the answer is look at every child like they need therapy, but we really should have some more thorough adjustment, teaching models to people, authority figures, people in schools, to say, are they not behaving the way that they should be? It's a slippery slope. It can be, because, it's like, who is mutual and who is not mutual, right? But I think if we could just look at things, quit sweeping this concept under the rug. It's the same with mass shootings. A lot of people are like, well, we got to get rid of the guns. We got to get rid of the guns. It's not about getting rid of the guns. It's about treating, having access to mental health care and treating people with these ideations or maladaptive behaviors before they get the chance to act out and enable their fantasies or do all this damage to people. Essentially, mass killers are serial killers. They're just doing it in one shot. And the punitive angle of like, well, okay, we'll catch them and we'll punish them afterwards. They're not afraid to go to prison. They're not afraid to die. You know, that's the whole thing. You can't do this in reverse. It's got to come from the beginning if there's going to be any real fundamental change with society in putting this, you know, some stop blocks in order. And that's something that people don't like to hear, because it's so easy to say, get rid of the guns, get rid of the guns. But when we have a government, you know, we have a government that can act in a tyrannical way whenever they so choose. That's not necessarily the answer. Any country should always have the right to stop, you know, and have a, I'm not a gun enthusiast, I should say, but it's just like, it should be like, you should have the right to defend yourself from come whatever. But when these tools are abused, the answer is more about, you know, getting ahead of it than coming from behind when the damage is done. So things like that, I think that if we just, and there's also all this discourse lately about sex education in schools, but children need to be made aware of, you know, adult predator tricks. They need to know good touch, bad touch. They need to know how not to get lured into things, and whether, you know, these conservative governments think that it's something that they should not be doing or not talking about gender or things. These are very important bits of conversation that are going to help keep kids from being abducted. You know, we have to look at things from a proactive angle instead of a retaliatory or post-event angle. Is I think pretty much the only way that we could really mitigate these behaviors, because even though there are all these different shades of killers, killer types, serial killers, spree killers, and I don't like the media attention that they get that kind of turns them into folk heroes. That's gross. But I think that these are important learning tools that, you know, that since the shift has gone into mass killings, we can look at it all under the same magnifying glass to say, see, if we mitigate these issues early in life, if we take some safeguards for our most vulnerable people, if we elevate people out of the status of having to live in ways that they might not necessarily want to, or that put them in danger, we would see, in my estimation, I think we would see a much greater, not only quality of life, but less impetus for people to take their shit out on other people and kill a bunch of people in a mall or a school or something like this. So it kind of is a have your cake and eat it too, because the gun industry doesn't really have to go anywhere. They don't have to prevent that kind of stuff from happening. I don't think anybody would argue stop it before it starts is the way to go. But then, you know, it seems to me that those companies should fund that kind of legislation changes, or push for those kind of legislation changes, and fund more mindfulness in schools and behavior therapies in schools, so that they don't look as bad on the world stage. But by saying we're providing the tools that are killing people, rather than putting the emphasis on the behavior of the killers themselves. So every so often, we are going to come across one of these. It's a little bit rare now, these serial or spree killer stories. But as we are shifting more into the mass killing area, I think the solutions are basically the same. Did you have some thoughts on that after I went on very, very long about it?
It's kind of in the same way of how you look at the result, that is, there's a lot of extremely destitute people at the border who need some kind of help. Looking at it at the, like, by the time you're at by the time you're at the point where the killings are taking place, you're never going to entirely eliminate, like, I don't think there's ever going to be an Earth where there are zero murders, right, like, ever, and murder is entirely gone and never happens ever. But you can kind of like in the same way, you're probably never going to get rid of entirely, like, traffic accidents. Like, even when we have fully automated. Like there's still going to be people who are like who are riskier, but at the same time, there are all these various little stopgaps that kind of help with that, like seat belts or like traffic lights or like street design, like making the car different. Like there's all these different preventative things you can get to along the way, and it's such a multifaceted problem where the way you go about solving it's not like the solve equation for x and then it's all taken care of. It's this whole it's a big old holistic multifaceted situation. Having fewer people forced to sleep on the street, like you said already, definitely eliminates lowers the number of people who are going to be shot in their sleep while they're sleeping on the sidewalk, because that's the only place that they have. Having fewer people, sex work is work, but if you are hanging out at a truck stop at 4 a.m. waiting to get picked up by a rando trucker, you probably are not in a great economic situation. I would assume that you did not make that choice out of love of truck stop hookering.
Love of the road.
Like you probably...
No, completely. People are, and this also goes to, homelessness and addiction. There's a bigger picture here that if these treatments, if these resources existed for people, many people would not be in these situations, these very desperate situations. So the evangelical set that, and the people that prey on these people that think that they're, not part of society and don't matter, they could get their way. They would see if we would give these people adequate access to therapies and job opportunities and UBI and therapy for drug addictions and things like this, we would not see nearly the amount of desperate people who are so vulnerably getting picked on, and then everybody could have their way. To me, it seems like here's the obvious thing to do. And if you're like in the evangelical set and you want these people to go away, well, then raise some money, talk to some senators and stuff, like say like, we have to get rid of them off the street because we don't like them. But we also, if we help them, then they cannot be that anymore. So
how do you go about, it's no like simple answer to this, like how do you go about instilling in your society a sense of purpose, that like what you do in the society matters and is somehow improving something? And how do you get you to like kind of intrinsically care about the people around you? How do you get this like kind of team mentality,
right,
which isn't like everyone lives in a commune and we all wear the same shirt, whatever. It's just like having the way we are currently programmed to operate is in an entirely competitive mode. You must outdo the person next to you. You must get your way to the top. And that base level of thinking and just viewing how the world works, I think, leads to more of this than not. If you instead had a society that is based on collaboration and teamwork and all this hippy-dippy nonsense, which I don't do just because it's the nice kumbaya thing, but it's what we need to do to progress to our next stage of civilization after capitalism. Like we've gotten to the peak that like market forces are ever going to get us to, and we've kind of peaked back in like 1904 is about when that happened, probably earlier depending on what economist you talk to. But the only way we can move forward now is collaboratively. You're never getting to another galaxy when you're all squabbling around. Like, you ever play the video game Mass Effect? The only way we got to international travel is after the whole war. You ever watch Star Trek? What came right before we got to space? Fucking world genocide. Like, we had like horrible that eventually like united the world, and then we started working together to get. I would like to skip that because we are like thinking beings who can foresee problems and work around them. Humans are great at problem solving.
That is Star Trek lore too, that it came to that, and that they collectively, we the people overthrew all of our own leaders and said we're not doing this anymore, and world socialism broke out. And I really can't think of a greater excuse to do that than in this time when we are all connected in real time. And that's why people aren't buying the narrative about Ukraine and about Israel being the good guys. They see what's happening to the Palestinians and they don't like it. And that's as far as we've ever come as a society to bonding over something that is right and just. And as soon as we start thinking of ourselves more as a global society and not just, as you say, is like me first, and being I guess you'd say, rewarded for that me first mentality about trying to get the next
zero-sum game
to get the next place at your job, or a little more for me, and thinking just about other people, just in general. Even if like the least you could do is just put a thought towards somebody less fortunate than yourself, then we're making progress.
We're told to think of society like a zero-sum game where for you to benefit, someone else must suffer. And that's just not true. I mean, I guess in order to have our current arrangement where the tiniest group of people have unimaginable power over resources and access to them, to have like a trillionaire, people do have to live crappier lives to get that much money. But like, it's so illogical to be at that stage, which I don't think I have to make that argument to anyone here. For everyone to have a very good standard of living, higher than what we have now. Socialism is not about making everyone have less. It is about bringing everyone up to our, like, we're not like, you got to throw out your air conditioner and you can't have a fridge or a microwave anymore. No, bullshit. I want Africans, every single African, to have a fridge, an air conditioner, and a thing. Like, we all can raise our standards if we aren't keeping on life support this ludicrous, microscopic ruling class.
It is. It's such a small, globally, it's such a small pool of people that, again, if you take the Star Trek mentality in the consideration, in that world, in that society, they were like, enough of this. And that's, I think we're just scratching the surface of where technology and connectivity meet, like getting rid of these disingenuous leaders who are just, scraping the earth dry for capital gain. And to bring it back to why this matters when it comes to mass killing and serial killing is because most of the people, and I mean, I didn't even get to talk about indigenous women. Those are the high, this huge vulnerable group of people who, again, also are often forced into sex work or just, again, not considered human by.
If you got a car, you're not walking 50 miles on the highway to get picked up by a crazy person.
Right, exactly. And the thing of it is, it's just like, we just need to stop acting like anybody is throwaway. That's the whole thing. And it's these people, because of course, we all want to be rich. We all want to be fabulously rich. We all want, Bezos and Musk money. And then we all tell ourselves, we'll give it to this charity and we'll take care of those people and we'll do this, that, and the other. And then we look at these people who probably never had that thought in their head their entire life, but they are just absolutely undeserving of this wealth and this power. And they're taking it from us all. That we need to look at things in a bigger picture where no one is throwaway, and we should all want to enthusiastically bring us all up to a standard of living where we're not all millionaire, billionaire, trillionaires, which is coming, but we are all doing really well and being proud of each other and happy for each other, instead of thinking we need to cut the throats of our next person over and stand on their corpse to get a slightly more ahead.
No one's worrying about buying food, because that's like ludicrous. I want everyone to be a little rich, like a reasonable amount.
Yeah, a little rich, and it's like
everyone should be comfortable.
Yeah, and you get the argument of like, well, if everybody has this much money, then everybody's poor. And it's like, that's not how that works. It is tied to inflation. It is tied to corporate greed. It is tied to legislation that elevates these destitute people and these very desperate people up to, a status where we can have a middle class again, maybe. Let's just start there. There's no middle class anymore. There's destitute poor, there's struggling, and there's trillionaires. Nobody is doing well.
Where's the biggest middle class in the world? Like, what country has the largest proportional middle class? China. It's always China when it's me talking. It's going to be China. Yeah. Who I only bring up because they have a communist government, and they are, at least if you go by like what's in the freaking books and read Marx and Lenin, they are moving towards like they would say that they are in a very early stage of a socialist form of production. That's what all it really is. It's They use all of their stuff to benefit the people who live in there, and you can say that's an evil mechanism to try and gain control over people. It's like, well, yeah, but they still get to eat the food. Like, it's not, the food isn't propaganda. The house they live in isn't propaganda. China has essentially eliminated extreme poverty. Like, everybody in China can eat, sleep indoors, and not die of like I broke my finger and I got an infection and I died. Like,
Right, exactly. And it's like I have a hard time looking at things and thinking, like, who wouldn't want that for their society? Like, who among us is looking at things like, I don't care if everyone else suffers as long as I do well, because someday I might become a billionaire too, and this is how you do it. Like, that's just unfathomable to me,
It's a
because we
scam.
could
It's
so
like a Hunger
easily
Games.
we could so easily have that, by way of just like, how trends change, just that we trend towards being more altruistic, that we realize that we're struggling to keep ourselves afloat and we can't save everyone, but maybe you can. It's that stupid old adage of the guy throwing the thousands of starfish are beached on the beach, and there's one guy walking around picking up one and throwing it back in the ocean, picking up and throwing it. And a guy walks up to him and goes, "What are you doing? You can't save all these starfish." And he goes, "Well, I saved that one." And he keeps throwing them. That's just, I think that's even a religious story. It's just, but it's something from, time immemorial, that, like, yeah, you can't save the world. I can't, Jared can't, we can't by ourselves. But if we just start spreading awareness and talking about what comes next, we don't like how things are. So if we just change our thinking and think, we're being told to think a certain way, but we don't have to be that way. Things don't have to be that way. And there are mutual aid societies, there are food banks. We're in the time of year where people do get a little more altruistic, in the month of December, maybe than in any other time of the year. So if you are looking for some way to contribute, you got a little extra money, you got a little extra time, look at food banks. The most animal shelters are completely overrun wherever you go in the country. Go volunteer a little bit of time at a shelter, or maybe adopt an animal or foster. Donate to a mutual aid group. RBN runs a lot of these things, maybe time or money or supplies. Just look into it.
Just give $5 to a guy on the street. Like, they're
if
gonna use
that's
it
what you feel like will help. I mean, because it's like, people like that don't like that he's gonna buy drugs or alcohol with it. Well, so what? So are you.
Yes,
Like, big deal. Like, okay, he can't have a good time, but you can, because you can afford it. So it's just do these micro things. And even say you're broke as hell, you can't do anything, post online. That's all. We've all got online. We've all got the internet. We're all here. We can all talk about it. Start wheedling on your friends and family who are super conservative, me first type of people, and just like point out that it doesn't have to be that way. It can be differently. And we will see mental health improve. We will see these hard living economic systems improve. There is so much that can be done with so little if we just do it in a big way. And you don't have to know all the buzzwords. You don't have to know all the right things to say. You don't have to be able to explain it at all. All you have to know is inside of you, you know that you don't like how things are going, and you'd like to see them be better, and you'd like to see everyone be better, and root for everyone, instead of just trying to get a little bit further ahead, because there is still room to grow. Even in a world where everybody is doing well, there will always be room to grow, and you don't have to sacrifice your ambitions. So on that note, let's just try and be a little bit better. Just spread the word a little bit, even if that's like the most you can do. It's still something. So thank you again for joining us for another riveting hour of discourse, and hopefully not discourse, actually. Hopefully that we're like-minded on this, and we will be back again the same time next week with some more things. You can at us on Twitter, or our handles here in the boxes are pictures, and or RBN, and talk if you have ideas for shows that you want us to address, comments, questions. We like to take that. Sometimes we could take some questions on air if we don't get too full of ourselves and we want to talk. And I'm going to hand it over to Jared to entertain us with a song. So thanks everybody for joining us, and enjoy this performance.
Doing another cover today. I like Alison Krauss a lot, so we're gonna do this. Oh, and if my sound's effed up, tell me in the beginning of the song, because that'd be less sad than at the very end. That was great. Couldn't hear your guitar though. You're the lucky one, so I've been told. as free as the wind blowing down the road. Loved by many, hated by none. I'd say you were lucky, cause I know what you've done. Not a care in the world, not a worry inside. Everything's gonna be alright, cause you're the lucky one. You're the lucky one, always having fun. Jack of all trades, a master of none. Look at the world with a smiling eye. Laugh at the devil as his train rolls by. Give you a song, a one-night stay. You'll be looking at a happy man, cause you're the lucky one. Well, you're blessed, I guess, by never knowing which road you're choosing. To you, the next best thing. Playing and winning is playing and losing. You're the lucky one, I know that now. Don't ask me why, when, where, or how. You look at the world with a smiling eye. You laugh at the devil as his train rolls by. Give you a song, a one-night stay. You'll be looking at a happy man, cause you're the lucky one. Were you blessed, I guess, by never knowing which road you're choosing? To you, the next best thing to playing and winning is playing and losing. Well, you're the lucky one, I know that now. Don't ask me why, when, where, or how. No matter where you're at, it's where you'll be. You bet your luck won't follow me. Just give you a song and a one-night stand. You'll be looking at a happy man, cause you're the lucky one.